So, guys, tonight what I want to talk about in the team training, and this is late April or mid-April as I get into this, but this will be relevant as long as you're in Vollara. The most important that you can do is get somebody's attention about ActivePure, because if you walk down any street in the U.S. or Canada and ask anybody if they've heard of ActivePure, 99% of them will say no. And so our job is really education. And I want to get into that later tonight. We're going to have a great presentation by a very sharp scientist that's going to talk about how to use education to sell Air and Surface Pro. But we'll get to that in just a minute. But I just wanted to share this because this works so incredibly well. Anybody can do this. You don't have to have any sales training at all to do this. It's the easiest thing in the world because in the English language, the phrase, by the way, is well known to mean we're going to change the subject. So if you're talking about the latest moon mission or the war in Ukraine or your new grandson, when that conversation starts to wind down, if you say, by the way, they know you're going to start talking about a different topic. And so the by the way approach works incredibly well to insert this question into any conversation right at the end of that conversation. Here's how it goes. You're talking about anything at all, the conversation starts to wind down, and you say, by the way, are you aware that a technology developed decades ago by NASA to keep the air safe in the International Space Station was just proven to eliminate 99.9% of a high concentration of the COVID-19 virus in less than a minute or less than 60 seconds? And then shut up. That is a powerful statement because you've established credibility by referring to NASA and then 99.9% reduction in less than a minute. Are you kidding me? How could that possibly happen? And so that's where our new 90-second video comes in. So now you have their attention. You can't get anybody's interest until you first have their attention. This is how you get their attention. And there's a 40-second video, and I think I said 90, it's 40-second video that is it's a simulation of a doctor's office waiting room in animation, and it shows somebody coming in and spewing out viral particles and how they spread to everybody in that room, regardless of the fact that there's filters and UV traps and everything in there, because they get to the people, the viral particles get to the people before they get to the UV trap or the filter. So this shows in 40 seconds why ActivePure is much more effective than the world's very best filter. And it also shows, because it shows it filling the air with these 100 killer molecules that just, are deadly to viruses, but totally safe to people. It shows the air being filled with these molecules, so people then get how it could be that it could destroy the virus within seconds of it being introduced into protected space. Helping people understand that that's not too good to be true is our biggest challenge. And that video is the very best I've ever seen at explaining that in a visual way. Most people are visual, so when they see it, they get it. And that should be something that's in your arsenal, right on the, I have it queued up on my cell phone when I'm going out into the world. I have it queued up on my cell phone, so if I'm talking to somebody, I say that, I can say, yeah, I've got the 40-second video right here. You want to see it? I just hand them my phone. I play the video, hand them my phone. If I'm talking to them on the phone or on Zoom or something, Zoom, I'll drop the link into the chat. They can just grab it. If I'm on the phone, I'll text it to them and I'll stay on the phone until they watch it. It's 40 seconds, no big deal. That 40 seconds is the most powerful tool that I've seen yet in the year and a half or so that I've been here with Vollara working with ActivePure Technology. So learn to use that every day in every conversation. At the end of the conversation, I don't care if you're talking to your doctor, or you're talking to your kid's teacher, or you're talking to the bus driver. Let's say, by the way, were you aware that technology developed by NASA years ago to keep the air safe in the International Space Station just took out 99% of the SARS-CoV-2 virus in a major test? Something, you don't have to use my words, but you need to get that communicated in a short period of time, and then you need to be quiet and see if they react. All you're doing is throwing out bait. If they don't bite the bait, don't pull in the hook, right? If that statement doesn't grab their attention, then they're never going to be interested, so who cares? Next. So if you just do that a lot, most of the time people are going to go, wow, no, I didn't know that. Very few people blow that off because that's such a powerful statement. So anyway, that's the by the way approach. Just wanted to cover that so you know how to get into the conversation anytime, anywhere. And you need to shut up and let the technology do the telling and selling, because nobody likes to be sold, but everybody likes to buy, right? You're probably like that. When you go into a store and somebody walks up and says, "Can I help you?" You always say, "No, I'm just looking," right? Because you don't want to be sold, but you're there to buy. Doesn't that make sense? And so if people know that our technology exists, they almost always want it, particularly when they find out, in this day and age, with prices of everything rising, the fact that the operating cost is so much less than the filter is a big deal. And so our Air and Surface Pro, that's the one for homes or offices or schoolrooms, draws only 43 watts. Guys, that's like a 40-watt light bulb. If you're going to filter all the air in a room, you have to move all the air in the room through the filter. That's going to take enormously more energy than that. Or air exchangers are a big thing today. The CDC recommends you exchange the air in a space 4 times an hour. Can you imagine the electricity required for that? And also, if you're using filter technology to clean the air, those filters have to be replaced, usually about 4 times a year. And we have a small filter, and ours only has to be replaced once a year, and the Active Pure cell itself only needs to be replaced once a year. So it costs far less to operate, and that's important for people to know, especially now. And because it uses less energy, guess what? It also, if you're talking to businesses, especially governments or these businesses that are all into the social agenda, it has a much smaller carbon footprint than any filter or air exchanger. So it has less impact on the environment because it uses less electricity. Therefore, it also costs less. So these are the things we need to educate people about. And here's some tools that we can use for educating. I'm just going to kind of highlight these, and I'm going to play a video presentation of a webinar. It's an educational webinar that's one of the best I've ever seen. I haven't seen the whole thing, so I'm going to watch the whole thing myself. I will also send you the link to this webinar because it's on Vimeo. If you have time tonight, stay with me and watch this, because this is how we're going to get this technology into every indoor space in North America. So the ways for educating consumers and businesses about Active Pure technology are, first of all, videos. It's really easy, especially that 40-second video, to get them into the information pipeline. And so videos are easy to send. If you're going to send a video, you need to tell people how long it is and ask them if they can watch it right now. And if they say, "No, I'm in the middle of a meeting, or I'm at work or whatever," then say, "No problem. It's only however long you said, 15 minutes, whatever it is. So it's only 15 minutes. So watch it later today or tonight, and then we'll have a quick call just to find out if you'd like to learn more or not." Does that sound fair enough? Guys, if you master that, that's the most important training I can ever give you. You don't have to get it from me right now. You can get it on our Tools for Tour Guides document. There's a link where all of this is stored in G Drive. So I've got both video training on those scripts and also the scripts themselves. They're in Word documents, so you can change them to be your words and not my words. But you want to keep the continuity and the brevity of these scripts. But if you can master the art of getting people to watch the presentation video, not the little 2-minute video or the 40-second video, but the longer presentation video, either later that day or that night, then you will win this game. That is probably the biggest challenge. Therefore, that is the most important training. So be sure you get that. It's linked in the Tools for Tour Guides document that everybody should have. If you don't have Tools for Tour Guides, by the way, don't worry. Because if you're on my email list, and probably you are if you're getting this on our training tonight, or you're going to watch this recording, then in the coming day, today is it's only the 18th. So by the end of the day on the 19th, I will send out a new Tools for Tour Guides with this video that I'm going to be showing tonight, which is so powerful, just a great educational tool. I'll send that out in a new Tools for Tour Guides tomorrow. So look for that. It's an attachment to the email that comes from me my from address is doug@askdougjones.com. So be sure that you put that email address in for me and your email's contact manager so that they don't go to spam. So here's the various tools that we have for educating consumers. So we do have these videos. Some of them are excellent. They're all short enough that people will actually watch them, which is really important these days because, as you probably know, everybody has a really short attention span. There's a flip book. Let me see if I can find it here. It was put together by Pastor Danion's group down in Florida, and they're charging way less for it than it costs. A 4-color glossy flip book like this with probably 20 pages, 30 pages maybe. Heavy duty stock, glossy, that would be $50 if you just wanted a one-off anywhere. They're only charging $20 for it. So that's also listed in the tools for tour guides. I would recommend getting that if you are going to be doing any one-on-ones. It's beautiful for a one-on-one, especially if you don't know anything, because it's so professionally done. And when you show somebody one of the pages, then the back page that you're looking at is what to say. So you don't even know what to say or need to know what to say. It's great. So the flip book for one-on-ones, I personally have never done a one-on-one, but I have the flip book just in case. Webinars are something I do a lot. And Mike Jackson does one every single Friday. He does a tech talk at 2:30 Pacific, and that would be 5:30 Eastern. And that tech talk is where you want to send people who are interested in the product for a second look. That's part of the pipeline of educating people who are interested in the product, potential customers. So be sure you're getting them on Mike Jackson's tech talk, and be sure that you're calling them immediately before to make sure that they get on it, if they said they would, so they remember, and then immediately after to get their reaction, right, and see what questions they have and take them to the next step. So that's every Friday, 2:30 Pacific. And then educational webinars like the one I'm going to show you can be scheduled anytime. If you'd like me to do a webinar for, you have a group of people, business owners maybe, or a company or something like that, I'm happy to do a webinar anytime. Or if it's just one person, then it's easier to just send a video. But if it's a group, especially a group where several people are involved in the decision, webinars are extremely powerful. We can do these private webinars. It's kind of like a private boardroom presentation, and they work extremely well. So that's an educational webinar. And then I really want to stress the Healthy Home Showcase. Guys, if you have not yet been on one of the Healthy Home Showcases, they do them online and people do them in their homes. This is what is selling probably the second most Active Pure technology right now, and all of our other products as well, the phenomenal nutritionals that we have. These Healthy Home Showcases are rocking the business. They really are. So they're going to do one next week. This is the 18th, so it'll be the 25th. Monday the 25th on the company Zoom. And unlike most company Zooms, usually in half an hour, this will be a little bit longer, probably 40 minutes. Either Mike Jackson or Dr. Troy will go, and a couple of other distributors will go through all of the products. So they'll talk about the Laundry Pure, the Living Water, the Active Pure. And basically, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a Healthy Home Showcase. And so that is a powerful tool. The company is providing thousands of dollars in incentives for you to get people to go to those, and you can invite them to the virtual one, or you can have them in your home and have it on a big screen and let Mike or Dr. Troy do the presentation for you. Just invite some friends over, have some fun, have some wine and crackers, and watch a Healthy Home Showcase. So if you are the host of a Healthy Home Showcase, and there's at least, I've forgotten what the amount is, but a pretty nominal amount of sales done at that home showcase, then you get a free, I've forgotten what it's called. It's a thing that's not sold by our division. It's sold by another division of the company, but it covers about 250 square feet. So it's good for bathrooms and things like that. So that it's like a $600 value. So that's pretty cool. So you get that for free just for being the hostess or the host. And then if people buy, they get extra goodies for buying. So watch your email today. If you haven't seen it, there's a Vollara email today. They've got a $500 discount on the Living Water right now, and a free Air and Surface Pro if you buy a 5-pack. So all this stuff is going on. The company is investing money to give you incentives to do these Healthy Home Showcases, and they work like a charm. People love to get together. People have been deprived from getting together for 2 years. People are longing to get together. So have some fun, have a wine and cheese party and a Healthy Home Showcase. You can invite people over next Monday if you want to for that. That's on the 25th of April. Or you can just watch that one so you know what they're about, because they're going to do these online every 2 weeks. But you can do them in people's homes every day if you want, every night. So this will drive your business big time if you learn how to do this effectively. And you don't have to be the presenter. That's the cool part. So a Healthy Home Showcase is probably the second best way to move a lot of Active Pure technology short period of time, and to also help other people in your business. If you're building a team, help them become profitable very quickly. And then the last is trade shows. Trade shows, guys, are mind blowers because you have huge numbers of people, if you pick the right show, that come by the table. If you're going to do a trade show, you definitely want to have the living proof of machine. It's only $100, and it shows how, not the Active Pure, but the reverse bipolar ionization just eliminates particles from the air. It's unbelievably dramatic. There is a link in the tools for tour guides that I mentioned earlier to a video so you can see what I'm talking about. It's impossible to describe how dramatic it is. And when people are coming by your booth at a trade show or expo and you have this thing starting to fill with smoke, they think it's on fire, so they all hang around to watch the fire, right? And then you explain what's going on, you fill it up with smoke, and you flip the switch, it turns on the bipolar ionization in the smoke with no fans or anything, and it starts to go in a circle, like a tornado or something, a slow tornado. And then it does that for about 20 seconds, and then boom, it disappears. And everybody goes, what happened? It's an awesome, awesome demo. So also you can demo the Air and Surface Pro with just by putting smelly onion on your hand, hold it over the Air and Surface Pro for a minute or two, and your hand won't smell like onion anymore. So I just wanted to remind you that ADA is your best friend, and ADA stands for attention, interest, desire, and action. This has been the mantra of professional marketers since the 1920s, over 100 years. ADA is your best friend in marketing. You must get people's attention. Doesn't it make sense that you have to get their attention before you can get their interests? Right? That's why that, by the way, question is so powerful. And then once you have their interests, then you have an opportunity to ask questions and see what their concerns are, like about safe air, or maybe they have allergies or asthma. Our technology does phenomenal things for people with any kind of breathing issues in their life. So find out what's going on and see if we can help them. And then once you build the desire, then they take action and buy the product. So that is the sequence that works if you want to make money in sales. I'm going to take this down and go to this video. And Patricia, if you would let me know, just give me a thumbs up if you can hear this once I get it going. So I'll tell you when.
In New York City.
Okay.
Avi, it's floor is yours.
Okay, great.
All right. Thanks, Todd. Thanks, Joe.
Guys, this is a 40 or 50-minute video
today. You know, it's a lot easier to speak to
stand by or else
involve
watch it
getting on
later.
a plane and making my way over to Texas. So it's always fun to be able to do it from the old home studio. But what I really want to talk to you guys about today is a slightly shifted approach towards selling Actipure, which is, it's great to be able to just talk about the product, but the way that I always like to approach it is less from just a place of let's talk about the product and sell it to you based on all the wonderful things about it, but instead turn it into an educational experience for the potential buyer. Shift your image in their mind away from, oh, I'm a salesman trying to sell you something, and instead, I am an expert in air cleaning technologies. I'm an expert in how bad things spread through the air. And I'm going to work with you, with your space, to figure out what is the best solution for you. And if that happens to involve Actipure, well, that's just a logical consequence of you really being very concerned about things like airborne pathogens. But in order to do that, we need to first put it into the context of the various things that we're going to be worrying about. And that definitely has COVID as a large component, but as we're shifting away from all COVID all the time, it's a slightly shifted environment to sell as compared to how it's been in the last couple of years. Let me just share my screen with you all. And all right. So the goal is going to be to figure out both how air cleaning works in the context of all the various areas that we need to clean, and specifically how the varying technologies that are on the market can play into the different aspects of air cleaning. When it comes to COVID, we're shifting into a place now where it is really becoming endemic, meaning that rather than everyone being entirely freaked out about this exponential spread of a disease, instead we are going to be seeing periodic waves. And a key component of that is that means we need to have a shift away from individual risk reduction methods towards systemic ones. The whole distancing, masking, all of that is a stopgap measure. It's flatten the curve. It's stop the exponential spread. But once it's at the point as being a part of our day-to-day lives, we cannot live our day-to-day lives going forward continuously, entirely distanced, entirely masked, not actually seeing each other's faces. Instead, rather than put the onus on the individual to put that mask on and stay away from people, we need to design our spaces to minimize the risk as much as possible while returning to normal everyday life. And the key component of that really is building design for safety when it comes to pathogens. Over the course of the entire pandemic, there's been over 6 million deaths so far, which is a crazy number, but that's the number everyone is talking about as something new. What they don't realize is there are many other causes for people dying because of dirty air. 3.8 million people die every single year as a direct result of air pollution in varying contexts. And there's a lot that goes into air pollution and bad air quality, but it is something that affects every physical system in the body. It affects the nervous system, it affects the lungs, it affects our blood circulation. Increased amounts of pollutants lead to so many different types of airborne diseases. And what that means is we are now living in environments that have nothing to do with how our bodies evolved. We evolved in an area like this. We evolved in a region that is basically the outdoors, and the contaminants we had to deal with were, if you're approaching some sort of very sick creature or a plant, occasionally your nose would pick up on something that's off, like don't eat this stinky meat. What it did not evolve to detect was all the things present in an environment like this. The pollution put forth by combustion, the off-gassing of chemicals from all the different things in this sort of crowded office environment. Technology has led towards drastically more contaminants in our air than ever before. But at the same time, what technology giveth, technology can take away. And our goal is to be able to use this technology to reverse and even go further, bring it back to the point where there is nothing in our air to really cause problems. So when it comes to actually developing an air treatment solution for someone, step one is, what are the targets that we want to get rid of? There are many different categories of airborne contaminants, and each one requires a slightly different approach. And once we know what we're targeting, we can look at the tools in our toolbox to dealing with them. First, we're going to start talking about the broad categories of different types of pollutants. We're going to spend a lot more time on viral transmission in particular, because it is something that people tend to care about a lot these days and has not really gotten the attention it deserves up until the last couple of years. We'll then shift over towards talking about the broad categories of air cleaning technologies that exist on the market, have been in existence for the last 150 years, and slowly being developed more. And we will finish off with talking about advanced photocatalysis, how Actipure slots in and really is in a category of its own when it comes to some of the most worrisome contaminants that we have to deal with these days. So step one is the inert contaminants, the things that go into our air that are not going to infect us, but they're just going to constantly bring our system down. And it starts with pollution particles. PM 2.5 is what is most often referred to as, and that just refers to the size of the particle. When you have exhaust coming out of a car, you've got all these little particles that are around 2.5 microns in diameter. And that's a key size because right around that size, it is able to be small enough to essentially remain airborne almost indefinitely. It gets buffeted around by wind and can just spread and spread. And at the same time, the smaller the particle, the more likely it is to get deep into our lungs and cause issues within our bodies. And the EPA has a threshold saying that, oh, if it's less than 12 micrograms per cubic meter, that means that's a safe level of PM 2.5 pollution. But as with most health thresholds, while it may be a defined threshold, that doesn't actually factor into how our bodies experience it. It's not this switch where it's yes or no. There are multiple studies that have shown that it is a sliding scale. Starting from no pollution, the more pollution that is in our air, the worse our negative health outcomes become. It leads to increased risk of neurodegenerative diseases, heart attacks, even actually increased risk of getting something like COVID because of its negative impact on our respiratory system. So the goal is really to get rid of as much as possible. And we'll talk about the specific ways of targeting the inert particles in a little bit. The place that these come from is similar to what produces the dangerous gases. Gases come in multiple different types, but the problem is that they're much smaller than your particles. PM 2.5 particles, 2.5 microns in diameter, those are still very large clumps compared to a gas, which is just a handful of atoms stuck together. Meaning that while you can filter out a gas with, or you can filter out a particle with a HEPA filter, you can't filter out most types of gases just with some sort of fiber. But these things are everywhere. Our cleaning products in our homes, actually even the furniture, mattresses in particular, flame retardants, all of these, when you put them into the house, they slowly start off-gassing, putting these contaminants into the air, and problems ensue. It's actually really bad when you turn your stove on. Ever since I got into air quality, I have installed air quality monitors all around my apartment, and I can tell if I'm out when one of my roommates comes and turns the stove on, because suddenly all the air quality monitors start spiking if there's VOCs in the air. And they're not so easy to get rid of. One particular gas to note is carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide, people don't generally think of as a problem because humans exhale CO2 with every breath. But CO2 itself is both an indicator of ventilation levels. The more it builds up, the worse the ventilation is. But it also can have a negative cognitive impact. This study went and took people and gave them a different battery of cognitive tests and raised the CO2 levels to fairly low amounts and saw consistent decreases in performance on cognitive tasks, even at the levels that would be totally deemed to be safe by most normal metrics. Even at 800 to 1,000 parts per million, which most rooms can get to within a very short period of time if you don't have good ventilation. I know the room I'm standing in right now can get to over 1,000 if I'm in here by myself with no window for more than half an hour. It's not great. But we like to use CO2 both as a metric for overall ventilation and just something that we need to be constantly balancing when it comes to designing the overall treatment solution. But then we've got the pathogens. So the thing about all of these other pollutants, the PM2.5, the VOCs, is that we've known about them for a long time, and we've considered them in the context of air cleaning for a long time. But up until the last couple of years, there has been very little thought put into the role of airborne viruses and bacteria in the spread of disease. And when the pandemic started off, there were many factual errors made, misconceptions that took a very long time to get past. One of the biggest of these is the concern about fomites, surface transmission of SARS-CoV-2. There was a study that was published within the first couple of months of the pandemic that showed that in varying different contexts, the virus can last for a long amount of time, up to 3 hours in the air while maintaining pretty high viability, cardboard, stainless steel, plastic for 24 to 48 hours. And because of this, you got the phenomena where my mother was coming home and wiping down all of her groceries before taking them out of the bags. Many people did that for a very long time, and I'm sure some are still doing it. The whole deep cleaning phenomena, where people are bringing in foggers and spending millions of dollars to deep clean their facilities, it spawned from this, where people thought that the virus could remain viable for large amounts of time on these surfaces. However, there was a key mistake made, which is that in that first study, the way they identified the virus in the air and on all of these surfaces was using a PCR test. We're all familiar with PCR tests now. It's the stick up the nose that tells us if there's COVID in our system. The issue is, when it comes to measuring on a surface or the air, a PCR test looks for genetic material, not for live viable virus. It's like me going and showing up to a crime scene, doing a swab and finding some DNA from a murderer and saying, oh, that must mean the murderer is here in the room with me because I found genetic material. No, instead it's just a sign that it was here. Similarly, if you do a PCR test to show that there is viral RNA on some plastic surface, that just means that it at one point was exposed, but it does not at all mean that it can infect someone because it's not testing for a full live infectious virus. And there are large numbers of studies that have been done looking at both the viability of virus on surfaces and how this has led to transmission. And one of the more common statistics that is now used is it's like a 1 in 10,000 chance of transmitting the disease based on surface transmission. And this is from a study that went and monitored high-touch surfaces in a community setting for a long period of time and actually measured how many people touched the surfaces, how much virus was there, and how many cases arose from. But the next problem that we started the pandemic with is this whole 6-foot rule, the droplet myth. Everyone was saying that the way this is spread is through respiratory droplets. And as we all know, the 6-foot rule is droplets fall to the ground within 6 feet of where you're standing. So if you're 8 feet away, that's pretty okay. You're not going to get it from me. The issue is that this 6-foot rule has been in existence since 1897, when the German scientist Karl Pflug wrote a book about basically disinfecting from viruses. And the thing is that the way that he determined 6 feet is through the advanced technology at the time, which was put a person in a room and measure on plates that he puts out in front of them how droplets fall down. it's not very accurate compared to what we've done a lot more recently, which is use high resolution, high speed cameras. All right. All right, we're back. Someone's got some ringing going. Okay. So we've been able to use high-speed cameras to show that if I cough or sneeze, I actually propel a cloud of droplets out 20 to 30 feet in front of me. And as they travel through the air, they slowly lose moisture, become smaller, and can end up as droplet nuclei, which can remain airborne for many hours. 6 feet, yeah, you're safer if you're farther away from 6 feet because as you're dealing with any sort of 3D environment, the farther from the source, the more dilution happens. But it does not mean that you're fully safe. And then we get to the last component, which is if you look at all of the documented cases of COVID transmission in the last several years, one of the golden rules is that indoors is by far more worrisome than outdoors. You get almost no evidence of significant outdoor transmission. And that's for a variety of reasons. Step one is, sure, outdoors you have a ton more ventilation than you get anywhere indoors. But that's not it. If you've ever walked down the sidewalk and had someone walk past you and you smell their perfume or they're smoking and you can smell them from a dozen feet away, you know that something coming out of one person's mouth or off their skin can still be detected by your nose a ways away. It's not just the fact that you've got that dilution happening. Instead, there are other mechanisms by which the sun cleans the air. Step one is the direct impact of the UV shining on contaminants, both inert and the viruses and bacteria, and it breaks them down. But there's also a lesser known factor, which is when UV light from the sun shines onto water, oxygen, and UV in the air, what happens is there's a reaction that produces oxidative particles. Superoxides, hydroxyl radicals, you guys are familiar with these words because, well, we'll talk about that a lot more later. But basically, when this reaction happens, you get the detergent of the atmosphere, hydroxyl radicals, which are capable of breaking down both the millions of megatons of pollutants that we put into the atmosphere every year, and viruses and bacteria, when they encounter them, it pokes a hole in the outer membrane, the lipid bilayer surrounding the coronavirus, and renders it inert, no longer infectious. However, there is no sun indoors. We don't get the direct or indirect disinfection activity, and that's one of the reasons why indoor environments are a lot more dangerous than outdoor ones. So we know a bit about the types of compounds we need to deal with in the air. We know a little bit about viral transmission. So the next step is, what technologies do we have available to us to go and help reduce these contaminants? Step one, the longest standing, the oldest, is just ventilation. It's how can we take air that has bad stuff in it and replace it with fresh air that has less bad stuff in it? It used to be that air outside was a perfect replacement because there's no bad stuff in the air outside. These days, I live in New York. The air from outside is of dubious quality sometimes, but at least it doesn't tend to have as many viruses. But ventilation itself is rarely a sole solution. The problem is that both you've got the potential contaminants from outdoor air, but also in a built environment, we engineer our systems to cool the air or heat the air. And when you're talking about anything other than a perfect temperate climate, it takes a tremendous amount of energy to either heat it or cool it. And the more fresh air you bring, the more energy you have to spend on the heating and cooling. And it gets prohibitively expensive if you want to rely on ventilation as the sole source for air cleaning, especially when it comes to pathogens where you only need a very small amount to produce an infectious dose. Next up, we've got the filters. Filter technology was originally developed back in the 1800s. Coal miners were breathing in coal dust, having issues, and someone had the bright idea that, hey, put something in front of my face, and it blocks some of that dust out. Then in the 1940s, during World War II, they realized that radioactive particles could go in the air, and scientists were breathing them in as part of the Manhattan Project. And they developed these filters that were able to filter out very small particles and keep them safe. And it's basically pretty similar technology that is still used in our buildings today. They take a piece of fibrous material, blow air through it, and what comes out the other end is cleaned of particulates. There are some small incremental improvements, but that's essentially the fundamental idea that has been in place this entire time. The problem is that that whole concept is designed to take dirty air from one place, pass it all through the filter before the designated treatment area where you are standing. It was not designed to stop the spread of disease within a space. More of that in a bit. HVAC filters are usually graded on the MERV scale. This is essentially a ranking of how efficient they are at filtering out different sizes of particles. When the pandemic first hit, the ASHRAE guidance said that everyone should upgrade to at least MERV 13 filters because those are the ones that can filter out ultrafine particles, small stuff on the scale of viruses. However, even a MERV 13 filter, as you see in this graph here, that's only going to filter out around 50% of virus-sized particles. You have to get all the way up to MERV 16, 17 before you're getting almost all of them. And the thicker the filter, the smaller the particle it filters, the larger the pressure drop across that filter, and the more frequently you have to replace them. Lots of HVAC systems can't handle something like a HEPA filter being put in because their fan can't force the air across that filter properly. And therefore, in order to actually upgrade it, you'd have to replace the entire HVAC system and spend a lot more money on energy, and that gets prohibitive. Next up, you've got carbon filtration. So we were talking before about the inert contaminants, the PM2.5 particles that are well handled by things like HEPA filters. And then you've got your gases, your VOCs, which can't get filtered by a HEPA, but carbon filters work a bit differently. A single teaspoon of activated charcoal has the surface area of a full football field. It's a very porous molecule. And when you put that in filter form, what happens is these gases flow across it and they adsorb to the carbon. And up until that carbon is fully loaded, it does a pretty good job at pulling out these harmful gases from the air as the air passes through. Although once again, you're still stuck with the issue of it only filters it when the air is passing over it, not necessarily in the space where these are being generated. Thankfully though, because VOCs are usually generated on a slow, consistent basis rather than acutely, having some source of pulling them out of the air will often be enough to just keep the overall baseline low enough in any treatment area. I was once actually going and doing a lot of in-person testing. I was doing air quality testing for an office building and an adjacent medical facility. And interestingly, I found that the office building had way more particulates in the air, but the medical facility actually had skyrocketing high levels of VOCs because they were so fastidious about their cleaning that they were using these cleaning products that were actually really unhealthy. And overall, their environment was probably worse than the office building. They weren't happy when I told them that. Next up, we're going to start getting into the slightly higher tech technologies. Electrostatic precipitators work by taking charged plates, giving a very high positive and negative electric charge, another plate that charges particles in the air as they go by, and essentially they're trying to get particles in the air to have an electric charge and then stick to these charged plates. This works reasonably well in certain contexts. So the issue with an electrostatic precipitator is first, the single pass filtration efficiency is only usually around 70 to 80%, meaning of the particles going through, it can only manage to grab around 70, 80% of them. Part of that is because of flow rate. Part of that is because some particles just don't pick up charges very well. But it also can have issues where the high electric charge can go and generate ozone. It can require very frequent cleaning of those plates because you're getting all the particles to stick to the plates. Suddenly they build up and it doesn't work as well. They do have a place. So I would say that the best application for a electrostatic precipitator is if you're dealing with a facility that has a very high flow rate, it's got particulate issues, and they're not going to be able to force all of that air through some sort of MERV or like high MERV or HEPA filter, but just because of the pressure drop problem. In that context, it can help get a decent amount of the particulates out. Next up, you've got UV. A lot of you, I'm sure, have been dealing with UV technologies for the last couple of years and have been struggling to try and say exactly how to sell against them. So let's walk through it. UV works by shining the light onto some sort of living organism, and it can kill it. It can kill viruses, it can kill bacteria, it can kill humans. It's all based on the dose. It's the strength of the bulb times the exposure time. And if that is high enough, then it can kill something. The problem is, this works very well if you can wheel in a big UV bulb, clear out the room so it doesn't shine on any humans, let it run for 15 minutes, and then at the end of that point, you've got a pretty good disinfection of whatever surfaces were exposed to that light. Okay, I mean, you have some occlusion issues where anything shadowed is not cleaned, but the big issue is that you need to clear out the room while doing this. You need to do it periodically because anytime it's out, then stuff builds up again. And when it comes to air, it doesn't help to periodically clean the air. You need to continuously clean the air when the people are in the room having issues. A typical HVAC system has the air flowing through the ducts at a minimum of 500 feet per minute. That's a fraction of a second of exposure time to these bulbs. And even industrial strength bulbs are not going to get a full kill against something like an airborne virus. Then you've got ionization. Ionizers are another category of tech that we often hear about because they're probably the closest to what ActivePure is doing. But that's just in concept. They practically work in a very different manner. When the air in the room goes past the ionizer, it's given an electric charge, positive or negative. It's actually very simple how these things work. High electricity, electric charge, charged particles become charged and sticky, and they're more likely to agglomerate. They're more likely to clump together, form larger clumps that either fall to the ground, stick to surfaces, or are a little bit easier to filter out. The problem is, charged and sticky particles aren't dead particles, meaning that there's a lot of research showing when you have these particles falling out of the air, if it's a virus or bacteria, they could still remain infectious. And while a lot of these companies will make claims about actually killing and neutralizing said pathogens, it's really only a tiny percentage of what is being produced that can have that effect. We'll talk about this more a little bit later. But you also have a bunch of other issues, which is that A, the claims that they make about their ability to remove things from the air are typically based on very small laboratory environments where they're cranking up the ion counts. When Boeing went and took these same ionizers and tested them both in their airplanes and in their labs, they were able to get some reduction of viruses, but a really, really small reduction, usually less than 0.1 log, almost nothing. And by no means even close to what the manufacturers were claiming. Then you've got the fact that
Well, I don't know what happened there, but probably it was a pilot error on my part. But no worries. The video is actually on Vimeo that you've been watching. So I will put that link to that video on page 1 of the updated tools for tour guides, which I'll have out tomorrow, which is going to be April 19th. So if you're watching this recording after April 19th, the latest edition of Tools for Tour Guides should have that. If you're not familiar with Tools for Tour Guides and don't know what I'm talking about, this is a document with about 10 pages of all the information you need to know to build a Vollara business in your first 2 or 3 months. So you don't get overwhelmed by the endless information that's available. This has just exactly what you need in the way of tools to educate people about this phenomenal technology and this great opportunity. So look for Tools for Tour Guides in the emails from me. I usually have it as an attachment. Always check the latest edition date, which is on the top right next to the title. It'll tell you when it was updated. And if you find one that's updated more recently than the one you have, then replace the one you have with a new one. So have a great day, guys. I'll get that out tomorrow. And do build for these healthy home showcases. That can change your life. You know, if you have 2 healthy home showcases a month yourself and you have 5 people doing 2, that is a lot of volume per month and you get paid on all that volume. So a healthy home showcase is what you definitely want to be pointing toward. You want to figure out how to get those done in your neighborhood, your situation. And remember, people love to get together, especially now after 2 years of not being together. So make it fun, have parties, and the Healthy Home Showcases come every 2 weeks on the company Zoom. And so you can just play it on a big screen in your living room or the community room at your development, whatever. Or you can do them yourself in your own home. So either way, they work, they move a lot of product, people have fun, and the happy mood is a buying mood. So word to the wise, guys, if you want to really maximize the value of the opportunity and get the most possible people to benefit from our products, then the Healthy Home Showcase needs to be part of your business plan. Have a great evening, and we will see you tomorrow. No, not Wednesday. No, tomorrow. Tomorrow on Live Prospecting, 5 p.m. Pacific. So if you're not familiar with that, check your email. See you later. Bye-bye.